Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. My name is Amir. For today's episode, we got Ernest. You can find him at Miami Heat Talk. And we got Martel. You can find him at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. And once again, we have Will Manso returning to the show. Thanks again for joining us, Will. How are you doing?
Will dropping the phone from Dolphins camp. Good start to the show. I'm good. Football season here, and it's crazy to think that basketball season is media 2 weeks away.
Yeah, we're getting really close to training camp. Thank God. It's been a pretty quiet offseason. The initial, main topic was Jimmy Butler and his extension. And we assumed on July 7th he was going to ask for that immediately. But then we saw Pat in the presser say, we're essentially going to wait and see what happens. And then Jimmy came back. I thought he was going to be disgruntled, but he's like, okay, that's fine. I won't sign an extension with anybody at this point. Let's just see what happens. So not a lot has happened really since then in terms of free agency, trade talk, and we're essentially running it back with the same core for the sixth time if we consider the core is Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler. So, Will, based on all that, I just want to get your opinion and your outlook on the Miami Heat next season. Do you think with Jimmy Butler in a contract here and with the Miami Heat healthy and the few pieces we added through the draft, do you think the Miami Heat can actually contend for a championship one more time in this Jimmy build? Or do you think we're destined to be a playing team for the third time in a row?
Well, look, I'm not sure that they were a playing team the last couple of years on paper, and then injuries and things like that obviously changed it to the fact that they were a playing team. So you are what you are, right? 1 year the playing team turned into a finals team. 1 year the playing team turned to a one and done. I'll be honest with you guys, when the season ended and as time moved on and the draft approached, I looked at the Heat and I said, they didn't make any major moves. I don't think this is a team that can contend for a championship. And that's how we grade the Heat, right? You said, okay, can they win a championship or not? Most teams are like, hey, you want to play well. You want to have a chance to compete. The Heat, as fans, as media, that's not the way we grade them. So to be honest, I didn't see this as a team that could contend. Then I started to change my tune a little. I went out to Vegas for Summer League, got to talk to people from the Heat, got to see some of the guys, obviously got to meet some of the new guys, see Khalil Ware, see Jaime Jaquez Jr. I was there the couple games that Jaime played. And I started to feel a little bit better about the roster, about a whole season of Terry Rozier, about Jimmy coming back fully motivated based off what you talked about, the whole idea of his contract, about Bam getting another Olympic experience and really taking his game to another level, about Tyler in the gym and really trying to prove doubters wrong, about the growth of Nikola Jovic. Things like that make me feel, and oh, by the way, with who I think the best head coach in the NBA, and Eric Spoelstra, things like that, guys, made me feel like while on paper they aren't a top contender, I think they could sneak into that conversation as the season goes on, as things fall right, because I do like their roster. I just don't know if on paper it's better than the top 2 or 3 teams that you're going to see in the East.
All right, well, so you mentioned, Tyler, Jimmy, Bam, plus Terry. So what is your starting lineup? I know that there's a lot of controversy over that, it was also reported that there's really only 2 starter locks. So that means that people are really going to have to earn it within training camp. So what's your ideal starting lineup for the Miami Heat? This Miami Heat team struggles to score 100 points. So not only do we need the offense, but then sometimes we do struggle with defense. So what's your starting lineup with Khalil Ware, Terry Rozier, Tyler Herro? What do you expect the Heat to pull out for the first game of the regular season?
It's such a hard question to answer because you got all camp and you're going to see what is Khalil like. He kind of let the cat out of the bag right away draft night when he said, hey, I want to play the 5 and Bam the 4. How much of that are we truly going to see? Let's not forget a few years ago when Mary Yurtsevin was talking about being the 5 and Bam moving to 4. So this isn't a new conversation. It's been flirted with. So would they really do that? I don't think they would do that off the bat. I think they'll play with the positioning and look at things. Khalil was really impressive in Summer League, man. Not just the numbers-wise, but the growth, the way he grasped to the Heat system. He's an impressive young man, man. He's a big dude. I don't think he's going to be a start off the bat. Obviously, Camp will determine that. I still think the Heat are going to try to give, we talk about run it back. I think they're going to give that lineup a chance again. They feel they didn't see enough of Terry and Tyler together with Bam, seeing what they could do there, how that lineup develops. And obviously, whether Nico or Jaime or who is that other person along with Terry, it's going to be interesting. Who are you going to put in that 4 with Bam at the 5? How are they going to mix that? I don't know the answer, guys. I really don't, because I don't think we saw enough of what we saw last year to really make a judgment. And I know that there are advanced numbers that show that it didn't work, But I don't think Eric Spoelstra and his staff are going to just fall in love with that and say, screw it. Let's just do something completely different. I think they want to give it a fair chance entering the season, full year of Terry, with Tyler, the comfort level there, with Bam, with Nico. See what you have there before you're really judging on what direction you want to go.
And that's going to be the good thing about training camp, Will. I feel like they're going to see who's going to fit best. I agree with you. I don't think Ware would start right away, but you never know. That's why it's up in the air. But you did mention something earlier, my guy, and I have to ask you this because you mentioned about how Bam Adebayo took his game to the next level, and that actually partakes into the question that I wanted to ask you because I feel like the last few years, it's kind of been hot potato with who's the guy with the heat. You got Bam, Jimmy, Tyler. They're all averaging about 20 a game. I really felt a couple years ago Tyler would have taken that ascent for the offensive level. My question for you is seeing what Bam has been doing lately offensively, upgrading his three-point shot, showing that he can be a dominant presence with superstars in Team USA. My question, Will, do you think it's time for Eric Spoelstra to give the keys to Bam Adebayo as the number one option? I know we talked about it recently in an interview. He gave a very good political answer, which is awesome. But I'm talking about being the number one focal point on offense. I'm really curious to hearing what you got to say about that.
I think the honest answer is I think it happened already. I think it happened quietly because Bam, number one, is not the type of person who's going to speak out. Spo, number two, is not the kind of person who's going to divulge any kind of information to the media, to anything. He's not going to leak anything out. I think they've handed the keys to Bam in the sense that everything that they have success with on offense and defense runs through Bam. And while Jimmy may be the star, quote unquote, because of his past experience, what we saw him do in the bubble, what we saw him do 2 seasons ago, the incredible performances when they went back to the finals, I think this is Bam's team. And there's a secondary part to that. I know it's Bam's team in the sense because he's the only one who's guaranteed me the future. Like we talk about Tyler's future. I know he's signed, but man, there's no guarantee he's part of the long-term plan. I think he's part of the short-term plan. And you look at Jimmy, again, we go back to the original thought of what's going to happen with that extension. It's not going to happen now. Is it going to happen after the season? Is he going to go elsewhere? Are things going to go south with Jimmy? How is that going to go? There is no question, zero, that Bam Adebayo is the future of this team, the present and future. So I guess the answer is they've kind of already done it in a very quiet way because he's the only one that could wake up every morning and know, guess what? I ain't going anywhere. I'm going to be here for a long time to come.
Do you think, though, Jimmy is going to allow Bam to take those keys in a contract year? And I know there's obviously room for them to, play a 2-man game. We don't see that a lot. They're not very complimentary, but Jimmy needs to play for that contract, essentially, right? He needs to take the regular season series, and part of that is what Pat said, availability. He's never played more than 65 games. So to prove that he's worthy of one more contract as an aging superstar, I feel like he needs to be available, but he can't really coast or load manage in the games like he did in the past. So can they coexist essentially where Jimmy is going to be playing balls to the wall in a contract year, but also allow kind of Bam to step in as that number one option?
Guys, I could be completely wrong, and certainly I have before. And obviously, without getting to camp and seeing Jimmy, because Jimmy goes in his whole, the tour of the summer of Jimmy, which he deserves it every bit to go enjoy himself. And we've seen it on social media. He comes back in great shape. He's ready to go. I don't think you're going to see a season. I don't think Jimmy's going to play 75, 78 games this year. I don't think you're going to see a big jump. I just don't. And at his age, he probably shouldn't, given the style of play. He is a grinder, a kind of guy who, he's got to push and shove and max effort for everything he does. He's not Kevin Durant, who in his mid-30s is so gifted that, he could just take shots and score 30 a game. Jimmy really has to work. I don't see Jimmy going out and playing 78 games this year, 75 games this year. I think the window of games of Jimmy is probably still in the mid-60s. Sure, maybe upper 60s would be great, but that's about it. So to your question, I also don't see Jimmy giving that max effort as far as like the full playoff style every game, because again, his body, he knows how to take care of his body, and it's worked so well over the years. Last year was the first year where it kind of abandoned it a bit, and then obviously late in the season, the flukiness of the injury and what happened and losing him. I think Jimmy's going to be smart with his body. I think he's going to be motivated, but I don't think, guys, Jimmy Butler's waking up tomorrow and saying, man, I got so much to prove to this league so that I can get that next contract. Oh, man, Jimmy's thinking, what else can I prove? I want to win a championship, but as far as the player, I know the player I am, and I'm going to keep being that guy. And I think you're going to see that from Jimmy this year. It's more the stuff around him too, guys. The conversation about Bam, the ascension of Tyler. Those are all things that lessen the burden a bit on Jimmy. If Jimmy has to be the superstar of this team for 75 games this year, the Heat are in deep trouble, because that means other guys aren't evolving and other guys aren't growing, and they need that growth internally.
So, Will, like you mentioned, like with Jimmy Butler, he's being, not necessarily low managing, but we all know that he could just pull up the effort just a little bit, because I don't need him to play 82 like you said. But we need that competitive 65. So knowing what we know, do you think it's worth paying him going into the future when Bam Adebayo, he's our future? You know what I mean? Guys like Jaime Jaquez Jr., he's our future. And yes, we didn't win a championship, and the run has been phenomenal. But we got to focus on pairing other players to move on from Bam Adebayo when, Jimmy knows he's pretty much close to the end. I'm not saying he's washed, but he knows he's closer to the end than the beginning. So what do we do with Jimmy Butler going forward? Let's say that he has a similar regular season to what he did last year. Where do we move? Because we can't pay him, $50 million plus, and we're not getting that max superstar effort compared to other teams that have Giannis, Luka, Joel Embiid, where at least they're getting the production during the regular season.
I think if they, based on what Pat Riley said, and I think you got to take him at his word, because Pat is a pretty open guy when he comes to the conversation, sometimes brutally open and honest. If Jimmy plays the way he did last year, as far as the games and as far as the productivity and where he is come playoff time, I don't think Jimmy plays past the season in a Miami Heat uniform, because I think Pat has basically laid that out. Now, I think internally they believe Jimmy's going to be back to being the Jimmy from a couple of years ago, and hopefully have more availability. Hopefully, again, be at his best in the playoffs and healthy, but also help them win games in the regular season, so they're not scratching and clawing their way into the playoffs in a play-in style. Again, I go back to the fundamental thought, though. It can't just be Jimmy alone. He is a superstar in theory, but he's not Luka. He's not, again, the stars of the league, Kevin Durant, even at his age, and the superstars that will get you 30 a game. It's just not the way Jimmy plays the game, so he needs the help. But to answer your question, I'll be honest with you guys, I entered this offseason thinking that Jimmy may not play this year in a Heat uniform. Like, I mentally prepared myself to think that this was Jimmy would not be back, because there would be some sort of friction, and they'd part ways mutually and say, okay, let's make a deal, let's get Jimmy somewhere else, and let's kind of rebuild around Bam. So to answer the question, certainly wouldn't shock me if this was Jimmy Butler's last year, based on everything that's happened and everything's been said in the last year.
So to that point, Will, my question for you, because we know in the NBA, the biggest thing right now, it's not like it was like 10, 15 years ago where players just become free agents and the market is open. Usually when players are in the last year of their contracts and an extension can't get agreed upon, they're traded. So let's say in a situation, the Heat aren't doing that great during the regular season. They're maybe 10-20. Injuries are happening, situations are going through. Do you think it's smart at that point for the Miami Heat to try to be sellers, to see maybe if it's best to trade Jimmy Butler mid-season to maybe get draft capital, young player assets? Or do you think no matter what happens this season, Jimmy will be in a Miami Heat uniform for the 2025 season? Curious on your thoughts.
I think they're all in with Jimmy this year. I think Pat drew the line. All right, Jimmy, here's the challenge. Let's get it done. Let's see what you could do. Again, Pat is very open and honest the way he says things, but I don't foresee them shifting within season. Now, after the season, absolutely. If things don't go to plan, they'll pivot in a million directions to build around Bam. That could include Jimmy, likely, Tyler, others. I mean, I don't think anything's set in stone except Bam. Jaime, they love Jaime. And just so you know, I think Jaime is a part of the nucleus of this team for the future. They love him. Really, really value him. They see him as a young star on the rise, and especially his work ethic, his availability. Do you guys remember Pat's press conference? What did he keep saying about Jaime? He used the word
warrior.
Work and availability, because Jaime wants to grind and play every game. Now, it's a little unfair in a sense, because Jaime's in his early to mid 20s. Jimmy is entering his mid 30s and has accomplished a lot more in the league. But no, to your point, I do not see a situation where Jimmy is traded this season. I think they're going to give it a go. Even a catastrophic collapse, I see the Heat trying to give this unit one last shot before moving forward to any kind of pivot towards something else.
I agree.
So what are your expectations with Tyler Herro? You mentioned earlier that he's been working, training off season. We know he's a gym rat. He has that work ethic, and he's always working on things, obviously getting stronger in the gym during each off season. But what are your expectations for him moving forward? Because it seems like every season is a redemption season for him, and his stats, we're not looking just at his stats, but like it looks like he's plateaued based on his role with this team. He's been averaging 20 points per game for the last 3. He hasn't really elevated his game, and that could be based on, again, his role and his fit with Jimmy and a few other players. But just what are your expectations for him this season? It feels like a make it or break it kind of season for him.
I'll tell you this, guys. I'm a huge fan of Tyler, so it's hard for me to understand the hate that he constantly gets. And so I think part of it probably brings on himself, because Tyler lets people know he hears the noise. And that's probably not the best thing for a young athlete, to let you know that you hear the stuff on social media, you hear the stuff in the media, you hear the stuff from the fans. Like, that stuff really you need to separate and just worry about yourself. But Tyler's a young guy. I think he gets caught up in that. I think he hates the fact that people will question his development and what he brings to the table. I think Tyler Herro's a valuable basketball player. I do. And in his own way. People talked about, okay, can he improve his three-point shooting? I think he's a good three-point shooter. Can he improve his ball handling? Look, he's got a long way to go. He showed it in the playoffs. He's not going to be a point guard, but he can handle the basketball. And I think he can improve there. Can he score 20-plus? Yeah, you just referenced it. He could score 20-plus. And there was a stretch that maybe the efficiency wasn't there, but he's not afraid to take shots when they needed him. And he could score even mid-20s. He could score 24 to 25 a game. Again, he's going to need a better volume, a higher volume. And how much does that take away about the efficiency of the team? There is effort in a way there that I think Tyler fits. To most fans, the simple answer is just make him a 6-man. I get it, because he had so much success in that role. But the Heat really want to give him a fair chance to be a starter. And they gave it to him last year, and at times he showed he played well. I still value Tyler. I still think the Heat value Tyler, and I still think there's more for him to give. The problem is, it's like the line of what he needs to be is constantly moving based on Jimmy out, this guy out, Jaime's role. Now you got this. Are you going to play bigger? Are you going to play small? What are you going to do? Who's going to ball handle? Terry's here, but then Terry gets hurt. It's a lot. It's a lot. And look, he's paid a lot of money. He's got to adjust. But I still think there's more for him to give this season.
He's like the most polarizing third option on any team I've ever seen by far.
By far, not even close. And again, he brings a little bit on himself because he's a young guy. He's got swag. He's not afraid, it's the way he dresses, the way he talks, the way he acts on social media, the way he's out around the game. Like, Tyler likes the attention. He's a fun guy. He's a very likable guy. But a lot of times that attention brings negativity, and I think it probably gets under his skin or in his head a little bit, because nobody likes to get criticized constantly, especially when you're a pretty good basketball player and have more to give, yet people act like he stinks or something. Tyler Herro is not a bad basketball player. I don't care what anybody tells me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what rubbed people wrong is also like his comment, I think 2-3 seasons ago, that he said he wants to be in the same conversation as Ja and Luka and Trae Young. And like, his game hasn't really elevated to that level. We assumed he could be like the next Booker, even though we missed out on our opportunity with Devin Booker in the draft, but we assumed that he could have elevated into a similar type of role.
But he's still young enough that I don't know if he'll get to that level, but I think he can get to another level that can help the Heat. And again, it goes back to the original thing. I keep going in circles on it, but this is when you have a team that's based on its whole and not so much as just a star or two, you need everybody to get better. And that's why the Heat are such a tough team to gauge, because if they don't get improvement in certain areas from certain guys, like a Jovic, like a Jaime, does it take a next step? Is Khalil really going to be an impactful rookie? It changes your thought of whether they're a 48-50 win team to whether they're a 44-43 win team that's trying to sneak into the playoffs. I mean, there's not a big margin for error with this roster.
And as we close out, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the prediction for the Miami Heat's win total is 44.5, which puts them as the 8th seed once again.
Here we go.
So yeah, and then again, there's so many different variables obviously we need to think about, but what is your prediction? Let's get you on the record before the season starts. Do you think they'll get over 44.5 or under?
Let me get to at least the Bahamas and enjoy that and see how they look. No, I think they win more than 44 games. I do 44, 45 games. I think that on paper, again, based on what I see and based on the full season of Terry, what you would hope is a very motivated Jimmy, even though I don't think motivation is going to be ever an issue with Jimmy. I think he always wants to strive to be the best. Bam's continued evolution, hopefully a step from Tyler and some of the other guys that we mentioned. I think they're a 47-48 win team, which would firmly get them in the playoffs. And then you go from there. The hope is you can be one of those middle of the pack teams at worst, right? win a first round, and then go take your chances with a New York or Boston or Philly in the second round. Look, that's the way it's going to be, right? Unless the Heat shocks everybody and is a 1 or 2 seed, the route is going to be you got to go through Boston. You got to go through New York. You likely got to go through Philly. You may have to go through Milwaukee again. That's just the way the East is. This is not.
I'm not phased. Bring them on.
That's what I'm saying. And, you know, then you worry about the whole West conversation. You don't worry about that now. I think they can compete. I do. I really do.
That's what I'm talking about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Will. We really appreciate you hopping on again. If you want to, before we hop off, do you want to let the audience know where they can find your work?
Always can find me Channel 10 for those local in South Florida. Valley Sports back with some Heat games. And on Twitter, you can always hit me up. I always love good Heat discussion at Will Manso. So any which way, we'll be talking plenty during the guys. Again, training camp opens at the end of this month. They head to the Bahamas to start training camp. It's crazy.
I'm excited. Thanks again. Martel, any last words?
Like, share, comment, subscribe, and thank you for all the support.
And that is enough said.